Russell Gahagan from Russell's Fishing Tech coming back at you with another video. It's our first video of the 2022 season. Happy New Year, and I hope you're ready to catch a bunch of fish in 2022. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to my channel, Russell's Fishing Tech on YouTube, so you get notifications every time that I put out a new video. We're going to put out a ton of content this year, from tips and tricks, tackle videos, on the water fishing, all kinds of stuff. I'm looking really forward to it, and I hope you are too. Also, make sure you suggest this channel to some friends. We put a lot of time into these videos and a lot of time into trying to help people catch fish. Let's spread that out as far as we can so that everybody has a really good 2022 season. Since it's the first video of the year and we're in 2022, what we're going to do is we're going to rewind back to 2021. This is my year in review video. I'm going to talk about sort of how the fishing was on Lake Michigan in 2021, what particular stuff I saw that was working, and when it worked and how it worked. Like I did last year, I sort of want to make a public announcement that, by no means am I saying that the stuff in this video, in particular the colors of the stuff in this video, were the only things that were working. Everything that I show you in this video is something that I think you should have in your arsenal, but by no means am I saying this is the only stuff that you should have in your arsenal, or this is the only stuff that you should run. As you know, from day to day, week to week, year to year, different stuff can be good, and most of the stuff, if not all the stuff on this table in particular, I'm reviewing from my personal success. If I took the time to show you all the pictures, videos, messages that I received with customers of Russell's Fishing Tech and customers of Salmon Candy that had success on stuff that wasn't on this table, it would take me hours to do that. So by no means do I think this is the only stuff, but I do think if you have this stuff, it's a great starting point for success. So let's start off the season. We started off strong with fantastic brown trout fishing, really all the way up and down the shoreline here in Wisconsin, from anywhere from down in Milwaukee and south all the way up to Kewaunee and north. They really enjoyed good brown trout fishing. I was only able to get out, I think, once or twice myself, and I did see some really good brown trout fishing here out of Sheboygan in that standard 10 to 20 foot of water. And as usual, we were using small spoons, in particular in gold blank colors. Early in the season like that, I saw colors like Salmon Candy's mini series in gold, Steely Candy, Wonder Wolverine UV, UV Two-Face, Dew Frog, Lance's UV Two-Face, which is a cool spoon because it's double-sided, and Confusion UV. All of those and some others like Orange Crush, etc., all were really, really good early in the season for spring browns. We were fishing in that 10 to 20 foot of water again, like I said, and we were making decisions on what colors to use based on the water clarity and what the water looked like. So early on, we started off with a bang. I think we saw 34 maybe or so pound brown trout caught out of Kewaunee by a customer named Steve on one of the mini Salmon Candy spoons. What an awesome fish, what an awesome experience for him, and it was fun for us to be able to share in that, being that it was one of our products that caught that fish. We got into a little bit later in April, that was March and April, we saw that brown trout fishing. As we got a little bit later in April, Lily and I made the trek down to Waukegan, Illinois to fish with Captain Dave on Bear King charters, and we were targeting Coho, early season Coho, and this was a little bit earlier than even I've generally targeted them a little bit, but we saw some fantastic success. What we noticed on that early season stuff, like before May, April type fishing, was the same mini spoons we were doing good on in gold blanks, particularly on brown trout, we did real well on cohos. And particularly that one day I did a fishing report with Captain Dave in around mid-April, and like the Dew Frog really stood out well. I know that particular day, Confusion UV was good that day. Wonder Wolverine was really good that day. You're noticing real bright colors, and the reason was we were fishing inside a 20 foot of water, or around that 20 foot mark, and we had some stained, dirty water. There was some water coming out of the pier heads. There was a little bit, I think, of some water from some wind that had been stirred up. That water was a little bit dirty, so instead of fishing more of the bright, like UV Two-Face type stuff, we fished like Dew Frog and Wonder Wolverine and Confusion and stuff like that really stood out. We tried some Dodgers. We caught a couple fish on Dodgers. You can almost always catch Cohos on orange Dodgers, but there was no doubt early in the year like that, spoons outfished the Dodgers. Same thing happened to Captain Matt and I when we made a trip down to Portage, Indiana with Lily and went fishing down there. We saw the same thing. I did a slide diver video while I was down there that you guys got to watch, early season fishing with slide divers. And what we noticed when we made that trip down there was the Cohos in particular were picking off our spoons and they didn't want to touch the Dodgers. So that was interesting to me. That wasn't something that I was totally accustomed to before, but I have that in my arsenal now. As the season went along a little bit, the Cohos did move up faster than normal, I would say. We had great Coho fishing in Port Washington already in early to mid-May. Matt and I made a trip that we videoed in mid-May, and we had a great day of Coho fishing that day, and then we enjoyed Coho fishing throughout the rest of May and into June even, out of Port Washington, going, anywhere from straight out south a few miles with great success. But what we saw once we got into that May time period was Salmon Candy's Dodgers started to take over. And we custom paint Gold Stars Dodgers in two sizes. The normal size everybody's accustomed to, which is the double O, like this one in particular here, the double O Steely Candy. And then the newly popular Stubby Dodger, which you can see a little bit different profile, quite a bit wider, a little bit bigger profile, also in the Steely Candy here. We saw these particular Dodgers really start to take off. Now, we only make like 5 colors of these Dodgers. I think we make Steely Candy, Winx UV, Coho Killer, Reverse Coho Killer, Jaeger Bomb, and I think there's one more. But at any rate, I think there might be 6 total colors of these Dodgers. None of them were duds. Oh, UV Fire Dot, that's the other one. None of them were duds, and actually this color, particularly Steely Candy, wasn't necessarily the best. It had its good days. But as you know, when you fish Dodgers, there's a lot of times you might put 6, 7, 8, 9 Dodgers out at a time. So we were putting almost all the colors out. And from day to day, or even throughout that same day, obviously different Dodgers would be better. So the good news is, because we're only making half a dozen colors, it's not like you need to have this huge arsenal. That's why we only make half a dozen at this time. We feel like that covers the bases for most conditions. What I found was that the double O, kind of the standard, more skinny double O Dodger, really worked well for us on boards, in particular like 1, 2, 3 color lead core type stuff, or even an inline weight like a ½ ounce or 1 ounce weight. And then what I really saw was these stubbies were really hot on slide divers. We did very, very well on slide divers with these stubby Dodgers. In particularly, there was quite a few days where, we went fishing, and I would call it mixed bag fishing. We tried catching some kings. We caught a few. We primarily caught Cohos. I think there's a fishing report out there for sure on a day that we went with Nick Ackley from Doc's Custom Crankbaits, who's also the painter for Salmon Candy. Matt and I took Nick out, and stubby Dodgers on our slide divers were on fire. That particular day, and a lot of the days, we probably caught half of our fish, and we got a 15 fish limit that day on 2 slide divers, 1 on each side with a stubby Dodger on it. So the stubbies really stood out. The double O's were productive as well. Double O's on the boards, stubbies on the divers. We even ran the double O's a little bit on downriggers, and they had their days, no doubt about it. As we got into a little bit later in May, getting toward that Memorial Day weekend and stuff, what we saw was some kings starting to show up. We saw some early season king action, but it was sporadic. And what we saw really was a mixed bag. We were doing very well on Cohos when we wanted to attack them. We were also utilizing the cowbell setup that I did a video on last year. And when I fished with Matt, and even on charters, we only really were running one of those on a deep downrigger like I recommend in a lot of my videos. And in one video in particular, I know we used the Mountain Dew cowbell. I did really well again last year on the antifreeze cowbell. Guys had great success on the silver scale. They had good success on the Charlie's Special. And they were pairing those up with the Salmon Candy Trout rigs. Like the Ron Bros Mistress was really good, and the Naughty Leprechaun was really good. So that's an easy setup. If you didn't get any last year, or if you need some more, that's an easy setup to add multiple extra fish to your catch on a daily basis. Lake trout are a great fish to catch. They're a lot of fun to reel in because they can definitely put up a battle, especially in that cold water, and you start to get into the bigger size. You get them on a downrigger setup where there's not a lot of other stuff on the rod. They can be a ton of fun to target and go after, and you're putting one rod down there, and some days you might get 6, 7, 8 bites on that one particular rod. So cowbells were really good from mid-May all the way through the rest of the summer. We had a cowbell almost always on our deep downrigger when targeting mixed bag, which was almost all the time, unless I was basically tournament fishing. And even this year in the Sheboygan Salmon Cup, if you remember, if you watched my podcast Morning Buzz with Matt Clinton when we reviewed the Salmon Cup, day 1 we did well on salmon. Day 2 we reverted to fishing lake trout with 3 downriggers and 3 cowbells, and if it wasn't for those cowbells, we wouldn't have won the Sheboygan Salmon Cup last year. So definitely a setup that you're going to want to have in your boat. Again, we make limited colors. I think we got 6 colors, 2 new ones this year. We have 4 from last year, a few different rigs. Great setup that you'll want to have. That gets us into that kind of Memorial Day and into early June time frame, and what we saw was the salmon showed up. They were a little bit tough to catch at times, the big kings, but we did enjoy some success with them. And what we saw stand out early was Megatron, one of my longtime favorite flashers. This is, the chrome version of Megatron, as we call Megatron UV. One of my all-time favorite flashers. That thing was on fire early in the season. Then white Megatron UV. Mainly, I'm not a giant white fan early in the year, as I've talked about a lot before, but, I will occasionally throw a white blade out just to see. I know in particularly on a trip or two with Matt, Megatron was just so good that we felt like we had to put the white version out just to have another option for another Megatron out there, and that fired right away as well. So those two really stood out early. As I said earlier in this video, these colors I'm going to talk about weren't the only colors that were working. They were just ones that, in particular for me, really stood out. Early season, Memorial Day weekend on through June, Megatron really stood out. As usual, for the second year in a row, Blue Stud UV was a monster early in the season. This flasher is just good in my opinion all the time, but it's really good early when that chrome and blue stuff is working, that more natural stuff in May and early June. May and through June, excuse me. And this year the Blue Stud UV didn't fail to produce. It was on fire. It was a great flasher to have and had its days where it was the one to be. The jeans flashers were really good 2 years ago. They were okay last year, and they really turned on again this year. What we saw was the green jeans and the blue jeans on the chrome blanks really had a lot of success. There were a lot of people, a lot of customers, and even myself and other charters here in Sheboygan and Port Washington area where 30, 40, 50% of their catches on a daily basis were coming on these two flashers. The green jeans UV and the blue jeans UV on the chrome blanks. Those were really, really good. As we got into about mid-June, on my charter boat, fish stick with Captain Nate, he started telling me that he was really pounding on a new flasher that we had last year, which was called the UV Dragon. This flasher actually the idea came from Captain Bill Safe over in New York. He refers to a flasher that he uses as the Dragon. And so we made 2 options, a glow dragon and a UV dragon on the chrome flasher blank. That's the front of it. It's got silver scale with the green herringbone ladderback look. But then the UV one has a UV solid back. The glow one has a crushed glow back. And all of a sudden about mid-June, this thing caught fire. And I mean, it caught fire for everybody in the area. My charter boat was catching them on it. I went out on a couple fun trips and charter trips, and it was on fire, catching some giant salmon. I posted some pictures of them, and then customers were purchasing this and started rifling in pictures of all kinds of big salmon being caught on this UV Dragon. So kind of a different one, kind of one that we hadn't talked about before because it was new last year. Definitely was on fire for a period of time in June there, where this was the flasher to have. Once we got into late June and into July, we started to see kind of a new trend that took off with a new product that I was excited about. We introduced 2 new flashers last year in shapes and sizes, and it's a fish blade, a double fin fish blade, and we introduced it in a 10-inch and a 12-inch. And what I saw in late June and early July and in throughout July was I saw a lot of guys having success with the 10-inch fish blade, the smaller one, using a new product that we brought out called the Vegan Rig. And what the Vegan Rig is, if you're not familiar or didn't see any of my reports, it's 3 teasers with a full fly at the end. So it's basically like a meat rig, but instead of having a meat head on the end with meat in it, you have a full fly. And that Vegan Rig is a great option when they don't want meat that particular day, or for guys that just don't want to deal with meat. They don't want to deal with the cost, the smell, the mess, whatever the case may be. You know, this Vegan Rig is a great option for a big rig that can, you know, add some big kings to your catch. And there was a period of time there in that late June through July where I was getting tons of pictures every day of 10-inch fish blades like this Mountain Dew stud, you know, chrome stud, blue stud, Megatron, you know, Black Eyed Peas UV, and so forth and so on, you know, UV Dragon, Green Jeans. Guys were sending me tons of pictures with these, and they either had a fly, just a single fly behind them, 30 inches behind it. So we started making 30-inch leaders, or I was seeing a lot of guys with this Vegan Rig attached to that 10-inch flasher, and they were having a ton of success with it. So that was kind of a trend that caught fire late June and really worked through, it seemed like, the month of July, and then kind of fizzled out toward the end of the season again. There was a particular trip, I don't remember the date now, but I want to say it was either late June or early July, where I went out with Matt, and we took out some friends of his out of port, and we crushed the kings that night. I think we had half a dozen or 7 kings, probably like 5 of them over 20 pounds, a few of them over 25 pounds. And we caught, I believe, the biggest fish of that night on this new for 2022 color that we were testing, 10-inch fish blade with a illumination UV Vegan Rig. So I had that out on a pump handle, and we definitely caught the biggest fish of the night on that particular bait. So when I saw other people having success with it and seeing that was working, I tried it. We had good luck. I got a picture out there somewhere of that particular setup and that particular fish, if I remember right. So we saw that as a late June and into July trend, so put that in your memory banks for this year. In June, we saw a lot of the same flies that we love and have come to love really work, like Illumination UV, Mercy UV, which I didn't have a sample of up here, but Doughboy really stood out. I know we had a couple of different fishermen in particular that really had success with that fly early this year. Cotter Bowen being one of them, where he was posting and talking a lot about Doughboy, so that thing caught fire, you know, with customers early in the year, and then everybody started using it and having a ton of success. So Illumination UV, Mercy UV, Doughboy, Novocaine, those were all really good late May and into June flies. Once we got into that July time frame, we started to see a lot of our greens work as we usually expect. Flies like No Mercy UV and Green Willie. We saw some special fish caught on Green Willie last year. There was a particular fish out of Milwaukee, I believe, in that 30, again, I don't quote me, but at the 34 to 36 pound range, I want to say, that was reported to be caught on a Green Willie salmon candy fly. We saw some huge kings being caught on those green flies, No Mercy and Green Willie, in that July time frame. And that was, the water was still fairly cool then. They were doing a lot of that success on the same kind of chrome flashers that I showed you before, Green Jeans, UV Dragon, etc., etc. And then all of a sudden, about Samarama, we got a blast of warm water. The water flipped over, the water got real hot. We were fishing 70, 80, 90, 100 down, and what we saw was it transition into that later summer bite. And then when that happened, we saw a lot of our aqua flies start to work again, like the Naughty Leprechaun. And then we saw the glowing leprechaun, which I don't have a sample up here, but it's the same thing as the Naughty Leprechaun with glow rubber legs. We saw those flies take off. But what we saw them take off on were white flashers. In particular, there was a 2 or 3 week period of time where the white icon was like the flasher to have. That thing was literally on fire for like everybody who had one. And I made last year and we didn't sell until this year, white green jeans. We made the white green jeans, the white blue jeans, white black jeans, white yellow jeans, white Hulk. We made that whole series in white for this year, but I tested that last year and a couple of guys had them, and that white green jeans really lit up when that water got warm and we started fishing deeper. I know that I went live during Salmorama at one point and we had a 5-banger, I believe, or a 6-banger of kings on all at one time. It was the night that my uncle caught, I think, the 4th or 5th biggest king of the Salmorama, like 29 pounds and change. That night, both white icon, white green jeans, chrome green jeans, they all took off. Might even been white Megatron, all took off with big kings on them, and we were seeing success transition over to more of those white flashers. We got into a little bit later in the year even yet, into August, and I made a trip up to Sturgeon Bay, where I went fishing with a buddy, Scott, on the rocks and reels. We had some great fishing out of Sturgeon Bay on the Bank Reef there. Enjoyed some success using primarily flashers and flies, and in particular on that particular trip, the Lucky Charm UV really stood out, which is one of my favorite flashers for that July and August time frame. I've been talking about this blade for years. This thing was on fire for about a 2-week period, 3-week period, in that late July through mid-August time frame, and we saw a ton of success with that thing, and a lot of guys picked that flasher up, and they had a lot of success with it as well. So as we transitioned into the later part of the year, we saw those white flashers really start to pick up, and that Lucky Charm UV was definitely one of them that we saw that we had success with. One of the oddball things that I would say we saw that worked, not really oddball, but it would be different than some of the things we've talked about before, is the 12-inch fish blade. Throughout almost the whole season, from probably mid-June all the way through the end of August, there was periods of time, short periods of time, where guys were having success with the 12-inch fish blades, like this one right here, the Chrome Black Eyed Peas UV, where they were having success with these with meat rigs. I'll be honest, it wasn't a great meat year for me again. I had maybe 2 or 3 particular days where meat really stood out, but that's it. And I tried it a lot. But there were other guys that did have some success with meat, and in particular, they were really having success mostly with these 12-inch fish blades with meat on them. So it's one of those things, again, where you should have that in your arsenal. You should have a couple 12-inch blades in your arsenal, and every time there's kings around, you should have one out on a deep rod, a deep downrigger, or a deep wire diver to see if that's what they want that particular day. But for me personally, meat didn't turn out to be that great. But I do remember one night, it might have been the night where I caught that big one on the vegan rig out of port. I can't remember off the top of my head or not, but it might have been that night. I remember communicating with Kyle Wickert from the Port Washington page and Connor Bowen. They were out fishing out of port, and they boated that 34-pound king on this exact flasher here, the UV Chrome Black Eyed Peas with a meat rig behind it. And they had multiple takes on that meat rig, I believe on a wire diver, if I remember right. I'm not 100% sure, but they did really well. So as we obviously got into the fall, we had our normal fall fishing where, there was a few days around the harbor area where, we caught some fish on plugs and spoons and things like that. But overall, the fishing started to peter out in that late August, early September time frame. We enjoyed what I would consider was a phenomenal 2021 season. The seasons have been progressing really well. 2019 was good. 2020 was even better. 2021, I would say, was even better yet. Numbers of fish were up. There's a lot of big kings around still. The Coho fishing was great. Early season brown trout fishing was fantastic. The offshore fishing in August with some steelhead, some Lakers, some kings mixed in was good. It was just a really good season, and I'm looking forward to 2022. I'm expecting also a very good season, as so far as I'm looking out the window right now, in 2022, we've avoided major cold weather for the most part. We're sitting here and approaching mid-January, and the Sheboygan River is still open. Here in the wider part of it, which is really good. Hopefully we can get through the rest of January and February without it getting, too cold for an extended period of time. That'll help keep the temps up in the lake, which will probably progress the fishing to start earlier and get going earlier and better. So I'm looking forward to 2022's fishing. This was the year in review for 2021. Hope it helps you catch more fish. Good luck and good fishing in 2022.